Behind the golden gates of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal secrets sleep in shadowed corridors, a single moment would shatter the careful balance of the British crown. What started as a routine evening shift for palace guard Thomas Whitmore became the discovery that would expose a royal conspiracy reaching the highest levels of the monarchy. On a fog-laden October evening, as Kate Middleton's name appeared on a document that should never have existed, one guard's accidental witness to King Charles III's midnight signature would uncover a web of deception, family betrayal, and constitutional crisis that threatened to bring down the House of Windsor itself. Some secrets are worth dying for. Others are worth killing for. This is the story of the decree that changed everything, and the ordinary man who held the future of the British royal family in his trembling hands. The crown has survived wars, scandals, and centuries of political upheaval. But could it survive the truth that Thomas Whitmore discovered that night? The answer would reshape the very foundation of modern monarchy and place Kate Middleton at the center of the most dangerous royal secret in British history. What you're about to read isn't just a story of royal intrigue. It's the documented account of how one guard's dedication to duty exposed a conspiracy that reached from the halls of Parliament to the private chambers of Buckingham Palace, threatening everything the royal family had worked to protect. The truth, as they say, has a way of setting people free. But sometimes, freedom comes at a price no one is prepared to pay. Thomas Whitmore adjusted his collar against the October chill as he began his midnight patrol of Windsor Castle's East Wing. After 15 years of faithful service to the crown, he had walked these corridors thousands of times, his footsteps echoing softly against the ancient stone walls that had witnessed centuries of royal history. Tonight felt different, though he couldn't explain why. The usual comfort of routine was replaced by an unsettling tension that seemed to hang in the air like morning fog. The grandfather clock in the Queen's Gallery struck midnight as Thomas made his way toward the private offices. His radio crackled softly with updates from other guards stationed throughout the castle grounds. Everything was proceeding normally, just as it had every night since his promotion to the elite royal protection detail. He took pride in his work, knowing that he was one of the trusted few who safeguarded the most important family in Britain. As he rounded the corner leading to the king's private study, Thomas noticed something unusual. A thin line of warm light escaped from beneath the heavy oak door, casting a golden stripe across the polished marble floor. King Charles III should have retired to his chambers hours ago, according to the evening schedule that Thomas had memorized along with every other member of the security team. The king maintained strict routines, especially during his recovery period following his recent health concerns. Thomas paused, his hand instinctively moving to the radio clipped to his belt. Protocol demanded that he report any deviation from the royal schedule immediately. But something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was the profound silence that surrounded the unusual sight, or maybe it was his natural curiosity that had served him well during his years in military service before joining the Royal Guard. Instead of making the call, he approached the door with careful, silent steps. The study door was slightly ajar, which was highly irregular. Palace security protocols required all doors to remain either fully open or completely closed and locked. Thomas had never known King Charles to be careless about such matters. The monarch was meticulous about security procedures, having lived his entire life under the constant threat of public exposure and potential danger. Through the narrow gap, Thomas could see King Charles seated at his ornate mahogany desk, his silhouette illuminated by the warm glow of a traditional banker's lamp. The king appeared to be reading documents, occasionally lifting his hand to sign papers with what looked like considerable reluctance. His usually composed demeanor seemed strained, and Thomas noticed the tension in his shoulders as he hunched over the paperwork. Thomas knew he should announce his presence or retreat immediately. Every fiber of his training told him to respect the royal privacy that was sacred within the walls of Windsor Castle. But something about the scene before him triggered his protective instincts. The king looked troubled, almost defeated, in a way that Thomas had never witnessed during his years of service. The guard positioned himself where he could observe without being seen, using skills learned during his military deployment in Afghanistan. From his vantage point, he could see that King Charles was not alone in the study. A figure stood in the shadows near the tall windows that overlooked the castle gardens. The person remained motionless, watching the king with an intensity that made Thomas uncomfortable. As his eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, Thomas recognized the shadowy figure as Sir Geoffrey Blackwood, the king's longtime private secretary and one of his most trusted advisors. Sir Geoffrey had served the royal family for over 3 decades, first as a junior aide to Queen Elizabeth II and later as Charles's right hand during his years as Prince of Wales. The man was known for his discretion and unwavering loyalty, but tonight his presence felt somehow sinister. King Charles set down his fountain pen and rubbed his temples as if fighting a severe headache. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper, but the stone walls of the ancient castle carried sound in unexpected ways. Thomas could hear every word clearly. "This goes against everything I believe in, Geoffrey," the king said, his voice heavy with resignation. "The constitutional implications alone could destroy the monarchy." Sir Geoffrey stepped forward into the light, revealing his stern expression. "Your Majesty, we have discussed this matter extensively. The alternatives are far worse than the action we are taking tonight. The information that has come to light about Catherine cannot be allowed to become public knowledge." Thomas felt his heart skip a beat. Catherine could only mean Kate Middleton, the Princess of Wales, who had become one of the most beloved members of the royal family since her marriage to Prince William. The guard had served on her protection detail numerous times and had always found her to be gracious, genuine, and deeply committed to her royal duties. But to do this to William's wife, King Charles continued, his voice breaking slightly, "To my daughter-in-law whom I have grown to love as my own child. The boy will never forgive me." "Prince William need never know the truth," Sir Geoffrey replied coldly. "The official story has already been prepared. A tragic accident, perhaps, or a sudden illness. The public will mourn, and life will continue. The monarchy will survive, as it always has." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the October weather. They were discussing Kate Middleton's death as if it were an inevitability, a problem to be solved rather than a human tragedy to be prevented. The casual way they spoke of deceiving Prince William and the British public made Thomas's stomach turn. King Charles picked up another document from the stack before him. This one appeared different from the others, printed on heavy parchment that caught the light differently. The royal seal was visible at the top, and Thomas could see Charles's hand trembling as he prepared to sign. "The order of succession modification," Sir Geoffrey announced, as if reading Thomas's thoughts. "Once this is signed, Catherine's children will be removed from the direct line of succession, and Prince Harry's children will take their place. The transition will appear natural following Catherine's unfortunate passing." "Harry will never accept this," Charles said, though he made no move to put down the pen. "He has made his feelings about the institution quite clear." "Prince Harry's acceptance is not required," Sir Geoffrey replied smoothly. "His children are already being prepared for their new roles. The Duchess of Sussex has been surprisingly cooperative once we explained the financial benefits of her children's elevated status." Thomas felt sick. They were not only planning to harm Kate Middleton, but were restructuring the entire royal succession around her planned elimination. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering, reaching into the very foundations of the British constitutional monarchy. King Charles hesitated over the document, his pen hovering inches above the signature line. "And you're absolutely certain that the evidence Catherine has discovered cannot be contained any other way?" "She has photographs, Your Majesty, detailed financial records, communications that definitively prove our involvement in the offshore accounts, and the misappropriation of funds from the Prince's Foundation. If this information reaches Parliament or the press, the resulting investigation will expose decades of carefully hidden arrangements. The monarchy will not survive the scandal." Thomas's mind raced as he processed this new information. They were talking about financial crimes, corruption at the highest levels of the royal household. Kate Middleton had apparently discovered evidence of serious wrongdoing, and instead of addressing the crimes, they were planning to silence her permanently. "The amounts involved are substantial," Sir Geoffrey continued, "and the public will not forgive what they will see as theft from charitable organizations meant to help the disadvantaged. Your Majesty's reputation, already damaged by various family scandals, cannot withstand this level of scrutiny." King Charles finally lowered his pen to the paper and signed with a flourish that seemed to take all his remaining strength. "God forgive me," he whispered. Sir Geoffrey immediately moved to collect the signed document, treating it with the reverence usually reserved for state papers of the highest importance. "The arrangements have already been set in motion, Your Majesty. Catherine will attend the charity gala tomorrow evening as planned. The incident will occur during her return journey to Kensington Palace." "Make it quick," Charles said, his voice now barely audible. "I will not have her suffer." "Of course, Your Majesty. Dr. Morrison has assured us that the method will be both swift and undetectable. The coroner's report will show natural causes." Thomas felt his knees weaken. They had involved medical professionals in their plot, corrupting the very people sworn to preserve life. The breadth of the conspiracy was overwhelming, reaching into every institution that the British public trusted. As Sir Geoffrey prepared to leave, King Charles stood and walked to the window overlooking the castle gardens where Queen Elizabeth II had once walked with her beloved corgis. "How did it come to this, Geoffrey? How did protecting the monarchy become more important than protecting my family? The institution is larger than any individual, Your Majesty, even those we hold dear." Queen Elizabeth understood this principle, and it guided her through 70 years of service. Sometimes sacrifice is required for the greater good. "Elizabeth never would have done this," Charles said firmly. "She would have found another way. With respect, Your Majesty, Queen Elizabeth never faced a threat quite like this one. Catherine's evidence could destroy not just your reign, but the entire concept of monarchy in the modern world. The public's faith in the institution would be shattered beyond repair." Sir Geoffrey moved toward the door, and Thomas quickly retreated to avoid being discovered. He pressed himself against the stone wall, his heart pounding so loudly he was certain it would give away his position. The private secretary emerged from the study and walked briskly toward the administrative offices, the signed decree clutched securely in his hand. Thomas waited several minutes before moving, ensuring that Sir Geoffrey was well away from the area. When he finally looked back into the study, he saw King Charles still standing at the window, his shoulders sagging with the weight of what he had just authorized. The man looked like he had aged a decade in the space of an hour. The guard knew he had to act, but the magnitude of what he had witnessed paralyzed him. This was not a simple security breach or a minor protocol violation. This was a conspiracy to commit murder, planned and authorized at the highest levels of the British government. Kate Middleton, beloved by millions, was going to be killed to protect royal secrets. Thomas thought about his oath of loyalty to the crown, sworn 15 years ago when he first joined the Royal Guard. He had promised to protect and serve the royal family with his life, if necessary. But did that oath extend to protecting them from themselves? Did loyalty to the crown mean standing by while they committed murder? As he began his retreat from the area, Thomas's mind was already working through his options. He could report what he had heard to his superior officers, but Sir Geoffrey clearly had influence throughout the palace hierarchy. The conspiracy involved medical professionals and coroners, suggesting that it reached far beyond the royal household itself. He could contact the police, but would they believe a guard's word against the King of England? And even if they did, how could he prove what he had witnessed? The signed document was already in Sir Geoffrey's possession, and Thomas had no physical evidence of the conversation he had overheard. The most direct approach would be to warn Kate Middleton herself, but how could he reach her without raising suspicions? Members of the Royal Guard did not have casual contact with the senior royals. Any attempt to communicate with her would be noticed and reported, potentially exposing Thomas's knowledge of the plot and putting both of them in greater danger. As Thomas completed his patrol route, his mind continued to race through possibilities. The charity gala was tomorrow evening, which gave him less than 24 hours to prevent a murder that would shake the foundations of the British monarchy. He thought about Kate Middleton's children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, who would lose their mother to protect secrets they knew nothing about. The weight of responsibility settled on Thomas's shoulders like a lead blanket. He was just one man, a simple guard who had stumbled upon a conspiracy that reached the very pinnacle of British society. But he was also the only person who knew what was planned, the only one who could prevent an innocent woman's murder. By the time Thomas completed his shift and returned to his quarters in the castle's staff accommodation, his decision was made. He would find a way to save Kate Middleton, even if it cost him everything he had worked to build. The oath he had sworn was not just to the crown as an institution, but to the principles of justice and protection that the crown was supposed to represent. As dawn broke over Windsor Castle, painting the ancient stones in shades of gold and rose, Thomas Whitmore began planning the most important mission of his life. He had witnessed evil wearing a crown, and now he had to find the courage to stand against it. Thomas Whitmore barely slept during the remaining hours before dawn. His small apartment in the castle staff quarters felt more like a prison cell as he lay staring at the ceiling, replaying every word he had heard in King Charles's study. The magnitude of the conspiracy weighed on him like a physical burden, making it difficult to breathe normally. When his alarm sounded at 7 in the morning, Thomas was already dressed and ready. He had made a decision during the sleepless hours, but executing his plan would require careful preparation and considerable risk. His first priority was gathering more information about the plot, particularly the timeline and methods they intended to use. The castle came alive with its usual morning rhythm as Thomas made his way to the staff dining hall. Fellow guards, palace staff, and administrative personnel went about their routines, completely unaware that their king had signed a death warrant just hours earlier. The normalcy of it all felt surreal, as if Thomas were moving through a nightmare disguised as an ordinary day. Marcus Henderson, Thomas's closest friend among the guard staff, waved him over to their usual table near the tall windows overlooking the castle courtyard. Marcus had served alongside Thomas for 8 years, and they had developed the kind of trust that came from sharing dangerous assignments and long, boring shifts together. "You look terrible," Marcus observed as Thomas sat down with his breakfast tray. "Rough night patrol?" Thomas hesitated, knowing that his next words could change everything. He trusted Marcus completely, but involving him in this conspiracy would put his friend's life at risk. On the other hand, Thomas knew he couldn't accomplish what needed to be done alone. "Marcus," Thomas said quietly, leaning forward, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to promise me you'll keep it completely confidential." Marcus's expression grew serious. He had served in the military before joining the Royal Guard, and he recognized the tone of voice that preceded dangerous revelations. "What's going on? If you discovered that someone in the royal family was planning to commit a serious crime, what would you do?" "That's a hell of a hypothetical question," Marcus replied, studying Thomas's face carefully. "Are we talking about drug possession or something more serious?" "Murder." The word hung between them like a loaded weapon. Marcus set down his coffee cup and looked around to ensure they weren't being overheard. The dining hall was busy with morning activity, providing enough background noise to mask their conversation. "Who?" Marcus asked simply. Thomas took a deep breath. "Kate Middleton. Tonight, during her return from the charity gala." Marcus stared at his friend for a long moment, searching for any sign that this might be some kind of elaborate joke. When he found none, his expression hardened. "Tell me everything." Over the next 20 minutes, Thomas related the entire scene he had witnessed in King Charles's study. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification on specific details. When Thomas finished, Marcus sat back in his chair, looking as stunned as Thomas had felt during those first moments of realization. "Jesus Christ," Marcus whispered. "The king himself signed the order? I saw him do it. Sir Geoffrey has the document now, and they mentioned that Dr. Morrison is involved. They're planning to make it look like natural causes." Marcus rubbed his forehead, thinking through the implications. Dr. Morrison is the royal physician. If he's involved, they can control the medical examination and the death certificate. No one would question his findings. That's what I figured. They've thought this through completely. The only reason I know about it is because I happened to be in the right place at the right time. Or the wrong place at the wrong time, Marcus corrected grimly. "If they find out what you know, I'm aware of the risk. But I can't let them kill her, Marcus. She's innocent in all of this. Her only crime was discovering their financial corruption." Marcus nodded slowly. "So what's the plan?" Thomas felt a wave of relief wash over him. Having Marcus's support changed everything. "We need more information about their specific plans. The timing, the method, the people involved. Then, we need to figure out how to warn Kate without exposing ourselves." "I might be able to help with the first part," Marcus said thoughtfully. My girlfriend Sarah works in the motor pool. She coordinates transportation for royal events. If there's something planned for tonight's return journey, she might have heard about special arrangements. Perfect. Can you talk to her today without raising suspicions? I'll say I'm trying to switch shifts to take her out tomorrow night. She loves talking about work, especially when it involves the royals. Thomas felt the first glimmer of hope since witnessing the conspiracy. What about Dr. Morrison? Do we know anything about his schedule or habits? He has an office in the medical wing, but he also maintains a private practice in London. I've seen him around the castle maybe once or twice a week. Marcus paused, thinking. You know, my cousin James works as a paramedic in London. He might have contacts who know Morrison professionally. That could be useful. If we can figure out how they plan to kill her, we might be able to prevent it or at least expose it as murder afterward. The two men spent another few minutes discussing logistics before agreeing to meet again during their afternoon break. As they prepared to leave for their respective duties, Marcus grabbed Thomas's arm. This is incredibly dangerous, he said seriously. If we're caught investigating this, they won't hesitate to add us to their list of problems to solve. I know, Thomas replied. But I keep thinking about her kids. Prince George, Charlotte, and Louis. How can I live with myself knowing I could have saved their mother, but chose to stay safe instead? Marcus nodded grimly and released his friend's arm. Just promise me we'll be smart about this. No unnecessary risks. Thomas spent his morning shift patrolling the state apartments, but his mind was focused on observing the castle's routine with new eyes. He noted which staff members had access to different areas, which security protocols might be bypassed, and where surveillance cameras were positioned. If he was going to prevent a royal assassination, he needed to understand every detail of how the castle operated. During his lunch break, Thomas made his way to the castle library, a vast room filled with historical documents and references that were available to senior staff for research purposes. He told the librarian that he was working on a personal project about royal security procedures, which was true enough to avoid arousing suspicion. What Thomas was really looking for was information about Sir Geoffrey Blackwood's background and connections. If the private secretary was orchestrating this conspiracy, understanding his network of contacts might reveal other people involved or potential weaknesses in their plan. The library's resources were extensive, including recent newspaper articles and magazine profiles of senior royal staff. Thomas found several pieces about Sir Geoffrey, praising his discretion and loyalty during various family crises. One article mentioned his close relationship with several members of Parliament and his influence within the Conservative Party. More interesting was a financial magazine article from 2 years earlier that mentioned Sir Geoffrey's role in managing certain royal investments. The article was vague about specifics, but it confirmed that the private secretary had significant involvement in the royal family's financial affairs. This supported what Thomas had overheard about offshore accounts and misappropriated funds. Thomas also researched Dr. Morrison, finding several medical journal articles authored by the royal physician. The man was clearly competent and well-regarded in his field, which made his involvement in the conspiracy all the more shocking. What could have motivated a respected doctor to participate in murder? As he continued his research, Thomas began to understand the scope of what Kate Middleton had apparently discovered. The Prince's Foundation, mentioned in last night's conversation, was a major charitable organization that handled millions of pounds in donations annually. If funds had been diverted from charitable purposes to private accounts, the scandal would indeed be enormous. The afternoon brought Thomas's scheduled meeting with Marcus, who had managed to speak with his girlfriend Sarah during his lunch break. They met in one of the castle's maintenance rooms, a location where their conversation wouldn't be overheard or interrupted. Sarah confirmed that there have been some unusual transportation arrangements for tonight, Marcus reported. Normally, Kate would return from the charity gala in the standard royal convoy, with full security protocols. But there's been a last-minute change to a smaller escort, and they're taking a different route back to Kensington Palace. That makes sense, Thomas said grimly. Fewer witnesses, more isolated route. Did Sarah mention who authorized the changes? Sir Geoffrey's office, apparently. They said it was for security reasons, but Sarah thought it was odd because the original route had already been cleared and secured. Thomas felt his stomach tighten. The pieces of the conspiracy were falling into place exactly as he had feared. What about the specific route? They're taking the A4 instead of the usual M4 motorway. It's longer and goes through some fairly isolated stretches, especially around Maidenhead. Perfect place for an accident, Thomas muttered. What about medical support? Are they changing the usual protocol for having a medical team on standby? That's where it gets really interesting, Marcus said. Sarah mentioned that Dr. Morrison specifically requested to be part of the emergency medical response team tonight, which is unusual. He normally doesn't get involved in routine event coverage. The confirmation of Dr. Morrison's direct involvement removed any remaining doubt about the reality of the conspiracy. Thomas felt a surge of determination mixed with fear. They were really going to do this, and they had planned every detail to ensure success. I also spoke to my cousin James, Marcus continued. He didn't know Dr. Morrison personally, but he made some discreet inquiries. Apparently, Morrison has been having some financial difficulties lately. Some bad investments or something. James heard rumors about gambling debts. So they're leveraging his financial problems to ensure his cooperation, Thomas concluded. Probably offering enough money to solve his problems in exchange for his participation. The two men stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the full scope of what they were up against. This wasn't a spontaneous crime of passion or a simple conspiracy between 2 or 3 people. This was a carefully orchestrated operation involving multiple government institutions and professional accomplices. We need to make a decision, Marcus said finally. Either we report this to someone in authority and hope they can stop it, or we take direct action ourselves. Who would we report it to? Thomas asked. Sir Geoffrey clearly has influence throughout the palace hierarchy. The conspiracy involves the king himself, the royal physician, and God knows who else. Any official we approach might be part of it or might report back to them. What about going outside the palace? The Metropolitan Police, maybe, or someone in Parliament. Thomas shook his head. They'd want evidence, and we don't have any beyond my word about what I overheard. By the time they conducted an investigation, Kate would be dead and the evidence would be destroyed. So we're on our own. It looks that way. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the magnitude of what they were contemplating. If we try to stop this ourselves, and we fail, we're dead men. You understand that, right? If we don't try to stop it, and we succeed, we're dead inside. Thomas replied. I can't live with Kate Middleton's blood on my hands. Then, we need a plan. A real one, not just good intentions. Thomas had been thinking about this all morning. The charity gala ends at 10 o'clock. Kate will probably leave around 10:30, which puts her on the A4 around 11 o'clock. If they're planning an accident, it will probably happen in one of the isolated sections between Slough and Maidenhead. How do we prevent it without exposing ourselves? We can't prevent the attempt, but we might be able to ensure it fails. If we can position ourselves along the route and intervene at the right moment, we might be able to save her life and expose the conspiracy at the same time. That's assuming we can figure out exactly where and when they plan to strike. Actually, I think I know how to do that, Thomas said, his mind working through the possibilities. Sarah has access to all the transportation schedules and route information. If we can get her to pull up the detailed plans for tonight, we can identify the most likely locations for an ambush. Marcus looked skeptical. How do we explain our interest without telling her the truth? We don't have to explain it to her directly. Can you get access to her computer while she's away from her desk? Probably. She takes a coffee break around 3 o'clock every day, and her workstation is usually unlocked. Perfect. Give me those route details, and I'll figure out how to position us to intercept their plans. As they prepared to leave the maintenance room, Marcus grabbed Thomas's arm one more time. Are you absolutely certain about what you heard last night? Because once we start down this path, there's no going back. Thomas met his friend's eyes without flinching. I heard King Charles authorize the murder of his daughter-in-law to cover up financial crimes. I heard Sir Geoffrey describe the specific method and timeline. I heard them discuss corrupting the medical examination to hide the evidence. I'm certain. Marcus nodded and released his grip. Then, God help us both. As Thomas returned to his afternoon patrol duties, his mind was already focused on the evening ahead. In just a few hours, Kate Middleton would leave a charity gala believing she was returning safely to her family. Instead, she would be driving into an ambush planned by people she trusted, authorized by a man she called father. But if Thomas and Marcus succeeded in their desperate plan, this night would end very differently than anyone expected. The truth about the royal conspiracy would be exposed, and the most beloved member of the royal family would live to see another day. The afternoon crawled by as Thomas went through the motions of his regular duties while his mind raced through contingencies and potential problems. By 4 o'clock, he had developed a rough plan that might actually work. By 5 o'clock, he was beginning to believe they might have a chance. At 6 o'clock, Marcus found him and confirmed that he had successfully accessed the detailed route information. As they reviewed the plans together, both men realized that Thomas's instincts had been correct. The route change would take Kate's convoy through several isolated stretches where an ambush would be both feasible and difficult to trace afterward. The conspiracy was real, the timeline was confirmed, and Kate Middleton had less than 5 hours to live unless 2 guards could accomplish something that should have been impossible. The evening shift was about to begin, and, with it, the most important night of Thomas Whitmore's life. The charity gala at the Natural History Museum was proceeding exactly as planned, according to the security reports flowing back to Windsor Castle. Thomas Whitmore monitored the communications from the command center, noting every detail about Kate Middleton's schedule and location. She was performing her royal duties with her characteristic warmth and professionalism, completely unaware that each smile and handshake brought her closer to a carefully orchestrated death. Thomas and Marcus had spent the early evening reviewing the stolen route information and satellite images of the A4 corridor. They had identified 3 potential ambush sites, each offering the isolation and terrain features that would make an accident appear credible. The most likely location was a stretch of road near Bray, where the highway curved around a wooded area with limited visibility and minimal traffic after 11 o'clock. The beauty of their plan, Marcus said grimly as they studied the maps, is that it doesn't require anything dramatic. A simple mechanical failure, a moment of driver distraction, or even a small obstruction in the road could cause a fatal crash at highway speeds. Thomas nodded, his mind working through the physics of high-speed collisions. Dr. Morrison's involvement suggests they might be planning something more direct. If Kate survives the initial impact, he'll be right there to ensure she doesn't make it to the hospital. Either way, we need to be positioned to intervene before anything happens to her convoy. They had developed a plan that was simple in concept, but terrifyingly risky in execution. Using Marcus's personal vehicle, they would position themselves along the route ahead of Kate's convoy. When they spotted the ambush team, they would create their own emergency to disrupt the assassination attempt and force everyone involved into the open. At 8:30, Thomas received a text message on his personal phone from a number he didn't recognize. The message was brief but chilling. Change of plans. The incident will occur at location B rather than location A. Adjust accordingly. Thomas showed the message to Marcus, whose face went pale. How did they get your number? And how do they know you're involved? I don't know, Thomas replied, his mind racing through possibilities. This could be a test to see if we're monitoring their communications, or it could mean they've figured out that we know about the plot. Location B, Marcus said, checking their map. That's the section near Cookham. More isolated than Bray, but harder to access quickly. Thomas was studying the message more carefully. Wait a minute. Look at the signature. Just the letter G. Sir Geoffrey would never be that careless with operational security, especially not in a text message. Then, who sent it? I think someone else knows about the conspiracy and is trying to help us. Thomas felt a surge of hope mixed with confusion. Maybe we're not as alone in this as we thought. Or maybe it's a trap to lure us away from the real ambush site. The uncertainty was maddening, but they couldn't afford to ignore the warning. Thomas made a decision. We stick with our original plan, but modify our positioning. If we place ourselves between Bray and Cookham, we can respond to either location quickly. At 9:15, they received confirmation that Kate Middleton was preparing to leave the charity gala. The evening had been a tremendous success, raising over £2 million for children's hospitals throughout England. In just over an hour, the woman who had helped generate those life-saving funds would be fighting for her own life. Thomas and Marcus signed out for their meal break, a routine procedure that would give them approximately 2 hours away from the castle without raising suspicions. They climbed into Marcus's modest sedan and began the drive toward the A4, their hearts pounding with nervous energy. As they drove through the quiet countryside, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Several times, he noticed vehicles that seemed to be maintaining the same distance behind them, but whenever he looked directly, they would turn off or disappear. His military training had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct was screaming that they were walking into danger. "Marcus," he said as they approached their planned position, "I think we need to assume that our involvement has been discovered. This feels too easy, too convenient. What are you suggesting?" "I think they want us to be here. The question is why." Marcus pulled off the main road into a service area that provided a clear view of both potential ambush sites. As he turned off the engine, both men sat in silence, scanning their surroundings for any sign of danger. "There," Marcus said suddenly, pointing toward a cluster of trees about 200 meters away. "Do you see the reflection?" Thomas focused on the area Marcus had indicated and spotted what looked like sunlight reflecting off glass or metal. Someone was observing them through binoculars or a telescopic sight. "We're definitely being watched. So what do we do now?" Before Thomas could answer, his phone buzzed again. This time the message was longer and came from a different number. "Thomas, you are in extreme danger. The conspiracy is larger than you know. Kate is safe, but you and Marcus need to leave immediately. Trust no one from the palace. More information will follow." A friend, Thomas, showed the message to Marcus, who immediately started the car engine. "How do they know our names? How do they know we're together?" "I don't know, but I think we should listen to them." Thomas was scanning the area around their vehicle, looking for escape routes. If Kate is really safe, then this whole thing might be an elaborate trap to eliminate us. As Marcus began to drive away from the service area, Thomas's phone rang. The caller ID showed only a number, no name. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. "Thomas Whitmore," he said cautiously. "Mr. Whitmore, this is Detective Inspector Sarah Collins with the Metropolitan Police. I need you to listen very carefully. You and Mr. Henderson are in immediate danger, and so is the Princess of Wales." "How do you know about Dash?" "We've been investigating financial irregularities connected to certain royal charities for the past 6 months, the detective interrupted. "Your surveillance last night confirmed our worst suspicions about the scope of the conspiracy." Thomas felt his world shift. "You've been watching the castle?" "We've been watching Sir Geoffrey Blackwood and his associates. The corruption goes much deeper than charity funds. We're talking about money laundering, tax evasion, and connections to international criminal organizations. But the king signed the order himself. I saw him do it." There was a pause on the line. "Mr. Whitmore, King Charles III is currently at Sandringham House, where he has been for the past 3 days receiving medical treatment. Whoever you saw in that study was not the king." The revelation hit Thomas like a physical blow. "That's impossible. I've seen King Charles hundreds of times. I know what he looks like. Sir Geoffrey has been using a professional impersonator for certain sensitive meetings," Detective Collins explained. "We believe the real king is unaware of the conspiracy being conducted in his name." Marcus had been listening to Thomas's side of the conversation, and his expression reflected the same shock that Thomas was feeling. Everything they thought they knew about the situation was wrong. "If the king isn't involved," Thomas asked, "then who is really running this conspiracy?" "Sir Geoffrey is the operational leader, but he's working for interests outside the royal family. The goal isn't to protect the monarchy, it's to destroy it. Kate Middleton's evidence would expose the conspiracy, but her death would create a scandal that would bring down the entire institution." Thomas's mind was reeling as he processed this new information. So killing Kate was never about protecting royal secrets. It was about creating a crisis that would end the monarchy altogether. "Exactly. And you and Mr. Henderson stumbled into the middle of it. Sir Geoffrey knows you witnessed the fake signing ceremony, which means you can expose the impersonation and prove the king's innocence." "Where is Kate now?" Thomas asked urgently. "Safe. We intercepted her convoy shortly after she left the charity gala and substituted our own security team. She's been briefed on the situation and is cooperating with our investigation." Thomas felt a wave of relief wash over him, followed immediately by a new surge of anxiety. If Kate is safe, then why are we still in danger? Because Sir Geoffrey and his people can't afford to leave any witnesses. As long as you and Mr. Henderson are alive, you can testify about what you saw and heard. The conspiracy depends on everyone believing that the king authorized his daughter-in-law's murder. So what do we do? You're going to help us bring down the entire network, Detective Collins said. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. Can you see the black Range Rover that just pulled into the service area behind you? Thomas turned and spotted the vehicle. Two people in civilian clothes were getting out, but their movements and posture clearly identified them as law enforcement officers. I see them. Those are my colleagues. They're going to escort you to a secure location where we can debrief you properly and prepare for tomorrow's operation. Tomorrow's operation? Sir Geoffrey doesn't know that we've intercepted Kate or that we're aware of the full scope of his conspiracy. As far as he's concerned, everything is proceeding according to plan. Tomorrow morning, he'll expect to see news reports about the Princess of Wales's tragic accident. Thomas was beginning to understand. When those reports don't appear, he'll know something went wrong. Exactly. That's when we'll have our best opportunity to capture him and his associates in the act of trying to cover up their failed assassination attempt. The two Metropolitan Police officers approached Marcus's vehicle and identified themselves before escorting Thomas and Marcus to the Range Rover. As they drove away from the service area, Thomas noticed several other vehicles converging on the location they had just vacated. Were those Sir Geoffrey's people? He asked one of the officers. Almost certainly. You came very close to walking into a trap. If you had stayed in that location much longer, I doubt you would have survived the encounter. As they drove through the dark countryside toward London, Detective Collins continued her briefing over the phone. The investigation had uncovered a vast network of corruption that reached into multiple government agencies and private organizations. Sir Geoffrey had been systematically looting royal charities for years, using the funds to support a complex web of illegal activities. The money trail leads to arms dealers, drug traffickers, and several groups with ties to international terrorism, she explained. Kate Middleton discovered the connection while researching donations to a children's hospital in Manchester. She found discrepancies that led her to uncover the entire operation. How much money are we talking about? Thomas asked. Conservative estimates suggest over £50 million have been diverted over the past 5 years. But the financial crimes are just the beginning. Some of the organizations receiving these funds are connected to human trafficking and weapons smuggling. Thomas felt sick. The scope of the conspiracy was beyond anything he had imagined. And Sir Geoffrey was willing to kill Kate to keep this hidden? He was willing to destroy the entire monarchy to keep it hidden. Kate's death would have been just the first step. The investigation that followed would have uncovered evidence pointing directly to King Charles, evidence that Sir Geoffrey planted specifically for that purpose. So the king would have been blamed for both the financial crimes and Kate's murder, along with Prince William, who would have been portrayed as either complicit or criminally negligent. The resulting scandal would have forced the abdication of the entire royal family and probably led to the abolition of the monarchy altogether. As the Range Rover entered the outskirts of London, Thomas could see the lights of the city stretching out before them. Somewhere in that vast metropolis, Kate Middleton was safe with her police protection, probably calling her children to say goodnight without knowing how close she had come to never seeing them again. Detective Collins, Thomas said, what happens tomorrow when Sir Geoffrey realizes his plan has failed? We'll be ready for him. And, thanks to what you witnessed last night, we now have enough evidence to bring down his entire organization. The secure location turned out to be a nondescript office building in Canary Wharf, where Detective Collins and her team had established a temporary command center for their operation. Thomas and Marcus spent the next several hours providing detailed statements about everything they had observed and overheard. As dawn approached, Thomas realized that the most dangerous part of their ordeal was still ahead. Sir Geoffrey Blackwood was intelligent, resourceful, and utterly ruthless. When he discovered that his carefully planned conspiracy had been exposed, he would undoubtedly have contingency plans for eliminating anyone who could threaten him. The battle to save Kate Middleton's life was over, but the war to expose the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed the British monarchy was just beginning. And Thomas Whitmore, a simple palace guard who had stumbled upon a royal secret, was about to find himself at the center of the most important criminal investigation in modern British history. Outside the windows of the command center, London was waking up to what appeared to be a normal day. But by the time the sun set again, the most trusted advisor to the British royal family would be exposed as a traitor, and the monarchy would be facing its greatest crisis since the abdication of Edward VIII. Thomas looked at his watch and realized that in just a few hours, Sir Geoffrey would be expecting to see news of Kate Middleton's death. Instead, he was about to discover that his entire world was collapsing around him. The morning sun cast long shadows across the secure command center as Detective Inspector Sarah Collins reviewed the final details of what she privately called Operation Checkmate. Thomas Whitmore and Marcus Henderson sat at a conference table, studying photographs and organizational charts that revealed the true scope of Sir Geoffrey Blackwood's criminal enterprise. The beauty of Sir Geoffrey's operation, Collins explained, pointing to a complex diagram showing money flows, was its simplicity disguised as complexity. He used legitimate royal charitable activities to create a network of shell companies and offshore accounts that could move dirty money around the world. Thomas examined a photograph of Sir Geoffrey shaking hands with a man identified in the caption as Viktor Kozlov, a Russian businessman with suspected ties to organized crime. How did someone in his position make contact with people like this? Sir Geoffrey has been traveling internationally on royal business for over 30 years, Collins replied. He had access to diplomatic channels, attended high-level meetings, and built relationships with influential people in dozens of countries. Some of those relationships were legitimate. Others decidedly were not. Marcus was studying a financial document that showed a transfer of £8 million from the Prince's Foundation to a company called Sterling Maritime Holdings. What's this company? Front Organization for Arms Trafficking, Collins said grimly. Sterling Maritime supposedly provides shipping services for humanitarian aid, but they're actually moving weapons to conflict zones in Africa and Southeast Asia. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. What had begun as Thomas witnessing a planned murder had evolved into exposing an international criminal organization that used the British royal family as unwitting cover for activities ranging from money laundering to terrorism financing. Collins's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She read it quickly and looked up with a satisfied expression. Sir Geoffrey just arrived at Windsor Castle for his regular morning briefing. He has no idea that the operation failed or that we've taken his entire organization apart overnight. How many people have you arrested? Thomas asked. 47 so far, including Dr. Morrison and 3 members of Sir Geoffrey's staff. The impersonator who played King Charles is in custody, and he's been very cooperative. Apparently, he thought he was participating in a security exercise, not a conspiracy to commit murder. Thomas felt a mix of satisfaction and lingering unease. What about the people who tried to ambush us last night? We rounded up the entire surveillance team. They were planning to eliminate you and Marcus regardless of whether the assassination succeeded. Sir Geoffrey couldn't risk leaving witnesses who could identify the fake King Charles. The detective moved to a large monitor displaying live surveillance feeds from Windsor Castle. In about 30 minutes, Sir Geoffrey will be expecting to receive a report about Kate Middleton's tragic accident. Instead, he's going to learn that she's alive, safe, and providing a detailed statement to investigators. How are you going to break the news to him? Marcus asked. We're not. Collins replied with a slight smile. He's going to discover it on his own when he checks the morning news reports that should have announced Kate's death. Thomas watched the surveillance feed showing Sir Geoffrey walking through the castle corridors with his usual confident stride. The man had orchestrated an intricate conspiracy involving dozens of criminals and millions of pounds, yet he appeared completely calm and composed. What's his escape plan? Thomas asked. Someone that careful must have prepared for the possibility of exposure. We believe he has multiple contingencies, Collins admitted. False identities, offshore accounts in his own name, and safe houses in countries without extradition treaties. But we've been monitoring his activities for months, and we think we've identified most of his resources. Most of them. Sir Geoffrey is extremely intelligent and has been planning for this possibility for years. We're confident we can prevent him from escaping, but we can't rule out the possibility that he has resources we haven't discovered. At precisely 9 o'clock, the surveillance feed showed Sir Geoffrey entering his private office and closing the door. Collins turned up the audio feed, and they could hear him making phone calls and checking email. His voice remained calm and professional, but Thomas could detect an underlying tension that hadn't been there earlier. He's starting to realize something is wrong, Collins observed. Watch his body language. Sir Geoffrey was pacing behind his desk now, his movements sharp and agitated. He made another phone call, and his voice became more urgent. Although they couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, it was clear that whoever he was calling wasn't answering. That would be Dr. Morrison, Collins said. He's trying to reach his co-conspirators to find out why there are no news reports about Kate's accident. At 9:15, Sir Geoffrey's phone rang. Collins had arranged for one of her colleagues to call him with fabricated information designed to smoke out his remaining allies and reveal his escape plans. Sir Geoffrey, they heard the detective say in a disguised voice, "This is Dr. Morrison's assistant. The doctor asked me to call you urgently." "What's the situation?" Sir Geoffrey replied, his voice tight with stress. "There's been a complication. The princess is alive, and the police are involved. Dr. Morrison said you would know what to do." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Sir Geoffrey slammed down the phone and began rapidly gathering papers from his desk, stuffing them into a briefcase. He then moved to a painting on the far wall and removed it to reveal a hidden safe. "Bingo," Collins said. "He's accessing his emergency resources." They watched as Sir Geoffrey removed several thick envelopes from the safe, along with what appeared to be a small handgun. He checked the weapon quickly and tucked it into his jacket before replacing the painting and heading for the door. "All units, subject is mobile," Collins said into her radio. "Initiate containment protocol." The surveillance feed showed Sir Geoffrey moving rapidly through the castle corridors, but not toward any of the normal exits. Instead, he was heading toward a section of the building that Thomas recognized as part of the original medieval structure. "Where is he going?" Marcus asked. Thomas studied the feed more carefully. "Those are the old servants' passages. There's a whole network of hidden corridors and staircases that were built into the castle centuries ago. Most people don't even know they exist." "Does he know about these passages?" "Sir Geoffrey has been working at the castle for 30 years, Thomas replied. "He probably knows every secret the place has." Collins was coordinating with her team to cover all possible exit points, but the castle's complex layout made it difficult to predict Sir Geoffrey's route. The surveillance cameras didn't cover the historical sections of the building, so they had lost visual contact with their target. "This is why we needed inside knowledge," Collins said to Thomas. "Can you guide my team through those passages?" Thomas nodded, already reaching for his coat. "Marcus and I know them better than anyone. We've explored them during our off-duty time." Within minutes, Thomas and Marcus were back at Windsor Castle, accompanying a team of armed police officers through the same corridors where Thomas had discovered the conspiracy just 2 nights earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now helping to capture the man whose secrets he had accidentally overheard. The old servants' passages were narrow and dimly lit, with thick stone walls that muffled sound and limited radio communication. Thomas led the way, using his intimate knowledge of the castle layout to predict where Sir Geoffrey might be heading. "There are 3 possible exit points from this section," Thomas explained to the team leader as they moved through a corridor that dated back to the 14th century. "One leads to the stables, another to the kitchens, and the third connects to the underground parking garage." Which one would he choose? "If I were him, I'd go for the parking garage. It's the least obvious and provides direct access to vehicles." They split into 3 groups to cover all possible routes, with Thomas leading the team heading for the parking garage. As they descended a narrow stone staircase that had been worn smooth by centuries of use, Thomas heard the faint sound of footsteps echoing from somewhere ahead. The passage opened into a modern utility corridor that connected the historical castle to the contemporary administrative facilities. Thomas could see fluorescent lighting ahead and knew they were approaching the underground parking area. "Contact," whispered the team leader, pointing to a figure moving rapidly between parked cars about 50 meters away. Sir Geoffrey had changed into casual clothes and was carrying a small duffel bag instead of his briefcase. He appeared to be heading for a dark sedan parked near the far exit, but his route would take him directly into their line of sight. "Sir Geoffrey Blackwood," the team leader called out. This is the Metropolitan Police. Stop where you are and keep your hands visible. Sir Geoffrey froze for a moment, then, suddenly, sprinted toward the sedan. The police officers gave chase, but the man was surprisingly fast for his age. He reached the vehicle and dove into the driver's seat just as Thomas realized what was about to happen. "He's going to ram the exit barrier," Thomas shouted. The sedan's engine roared to life, and Sir Geoffrey floored the accelerator. The car shot forward toward the parking garage's exit gate, which was designed to stop unauthorized vehicles, but wouldn't withstand a direct impact at high speed. Thomas made a split-second decision that probably saved several lives. Instead of taking cover, he sprinted toward an emergency control panel mounted on the wall near the exit. As Sir Geoffrey's car approached the barrier, Thomas pulled the fire alarm, which automatically sealed all exits and activated the building's emergency lighting. Heavy steel plates dropped from the ceiling, blocking the parking garage exits just seconds before Sir Geoffrey's car would have broken through. The sedan slammed into the steel barrier at 40 miles per hour, the impact crushing the front end and deploying the airbags. The police officers reached the wrecked vehicle within seconds, but Sir Geoffrey was already unconscious from the impact. As paramedics were called to treat his injuries, investigators began searching his abandoned duffel bag and the sedan. Fake passports, nearly £100,000 in cash, and a loaded pistol, Collins reported as she joined them in the parking garage, plus a laptop computer that probably contains enough evidence to convict half of his organization. Thomas watched as paramedics loaded Sir Geoffrey onto a stretcher. The man who had orchestrated an international criminal conspiracy and planned to murder a member of the royal family now looked like any other injured criminal, stripped of the authority and respect that had enabled his crimes. "Is he going to survive?" Thomas asked. "Probably," Collins replied, "which is good for us, because we're going to need his testimony to prosecute everyone involved in this network." As they left the parking garage, Collins received a call confirming that the last of Sir Geoffrey's known associates had been arrested. The conspiracy that had threatened to destroy the British monarchy was finally over. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we begin the process of unraveling everything Sir Geoffrey built," Collins explained. "His computer records will lead us to bank accounts, shell companies, and criminal contacts all over the world. This investigation will probably continue for years." Thomas felt exhausted, but also deeply satisfied. 2 days ago, he had been a simple palace guard going about his routine duties. Now he had helped expose the most significant threat to the British royal family in modern history. "Will the truth about all of this become public?" he asked. "Some of it will have to," Collins replied. "Sir Geoffrey's trial will be a matter of public record, and the evidence against him is overwhelming. But the specific details about the planned assassination and the impersonation of King Charles will probably remain classified for national security reasons." As they emerged from the castle into the afternoon sunlight, Thomas saw Kate Middleton's official car arriving for what appeared to be a routine visit. The woman who had come so close to death 2 nights earlier was now safe to continue her royal duties, completely protected from the conspiracy that had nearly claimed her life. "She doesn't know how close she came, does she?" Thomas said. "She knows she was in danger, and that we prevented it," Collins replied. "But she doesn't know about the specific details of what you overheard. We thought it was better that way." Thomas nodded, understanding the wisdom of protecting Kate from the full knowledge of how carefully her murder had been planned by people she trusted. As they walked toward the police vehicles that would take them back to London for final debriefings, Thomas reflected on the extraordinary events of the past few days. He had witnessed evil wearing a crown, fought against corruption in the highest levels of government, and helped save the life of one of the most beloved women in Britain. The conspiracy was over, but Thomas knew that the real work was just beginning. Sir Geoffrey's network had tentacles reaching into criminal organizations around the world, and dismantling it completely would require international cooperation and years of dedicated investigation. But, for now, Kate Middleton was safe, the monarchy was secure, and a dangerous traitor was in custody. Sometimes, Thomas thought, that was enough. 6 months after the arrest of Sir Geoffrey Blackwood, Thomas Whitmore stood in the same Windsor Castle corridor where he had first overheard the conspiracy that nearly destroyed the British monarchy. The ancient stones looked the same, but everything else had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The official story released to the public had been carefully crafted to protect national security while ensuring that justice was served. Sir Geoffrey Blackwood had been sentenced to life in prison for multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and treason. The international criminal network he had built using royal resources was systematically dismantled, with arrests made in 17 countries. Dr. Morrison had received a 20-year sentence after cooperating fully with investigators. His testimony had proven crucial in understanding how the conspiracy operated and identifying other medical professionals who had been corrupted by Sir Geoffrey's organization. The doctor's gambling debts had made him vulnerable to blackmail, but his genuine remorse and cooperation had earned him some consideration during sentencing. Thomas had been quietly transferred to a new position within the Royal Protection Command, with a significant promotion and salary increase that reflected his extraordinary service to the Crown. The official commendation in his file made no mention of the specific details of his actions, simply noting his exceptional dedication to duty during a sensitive security matter. Marcus Henderson had received similar recognition and had been assigned to Kate Middleton's permanent protection detail, a posting that both men understood was the highest honor that could be bestowed upon a royal guard. The Princess of Wales had specifically requested Marcus for her team, though she had never been told exactly why his name had come to her attention. Detective Inspector Sarah Collins had been promoted to Chief Inspector and placed in charge of a new unit dedicated to investigating financial crimes involving public institutions. Her success in exposing Sir Geoffrey's network had established her as one of the Metropolitan Police's most capable investigators, though she would never be able to discuss her greatest triumph publicly. The real King Charles III had been quietly briefed on the full scope of the conspiracy that had been conducted in his name. His initial shock and anger had given way to profound gratitude for the people who had prevented a catastrophe that would have destroyed his family and his kingdom. He had insisted on personally thanking Thomas, though the meeting had been conducted in absolute secrecy. "Mr. Whitmore," the king had said during their private audience, "I understand that you risked everything to protect my daughter-in-law and preserve the integrity of the crown. Your loyalty and courage represent the finest traditions of service to the monarchy." Thomas had been deeply moved by the king's words, but what affected him most was the genuine emotion in Charles's voice when he spoke about Kate Middleton and his grandchildren. The conspiracy had not just threatened the institution of monarchy, it had targeted a beloved family member. Kate Middleton herself had been briefed on the general facts of the plot against her life, though many of the specific details remained classified. She had requested a private meeting with Thomas, which had taken place in a secure room at Kensington Palace with only her closest protection officers present. "I understand that I owe my life to your vigilance and courage," she had said simply. "I know I can never properly thank you for what you did, but I want you to know that William and I will never forget it." Thomas had been struck by her composure and grace under circumstances that would have shattered most people. Kate Middleton possessed a strength that went far beyond her public image, and he understood why Sir Geoffrey had seen her as such a dangerous threat to his conspiracy. The financial investigation had revealed the staggering scope of Sir Geoffrey's criminal enterprise. Over £80 million had been stolen from various royal charities over a period of 8 years, with the money being used to finance everything from arms trafficking to human smuggling. The recovery of these funds had taken months of work by international law enforcement agencies, but most of the money had eventually been returned to the charitable organizations it had been stolen from. The international implications of the conspiracy had required delicate diplomatic work to prevent it from becoming a source of tension between Britain and other nations. Several countries had unknowingly provided safe harbor to Sir Geoffrey's criminal associates, and extradition proceedings were still ongoing in multiple jurisdictions. Thomas often thought about the chain of events that had led to the conspiracy's exposure. If he had been assigned to a different patrol route that night, or if he had followed protocol and simply reported the unusual activity without investigating further, Kate Middleton would have died, and the British monarchy might have collapsed under the weight of manufactured scandal. The randomness of it troubled him sometimes. So much had depended on one person being in the right place at the right time, with the courage to act on what he had witnessed. How many other conspiracies might be operating in plain sight, waiting for someone to accidentally stumble upon them? Detective Inspector Collins had shared some of these concerns during one of their periodic meetings to review the ongoing investigation. "The scary thing about Sir Geoffrey's operation," she had said, "is how long it might have continued if you hadn't witnessed that fake signing ceremony. He was incredibly careful, incredibly patient, and had unlimited access to the people and resources he needed." "Do you think there are others like him?" Thomas had asked. "Almost certainly. Sir Geoffrey wasn't unique except in the scope of his ambition. There are probably dozens of people in positions of trust who are using their access for criminal purposes. The question is whether we'll be lucky enough to catch them before they do irreparable damage." The thought was sobering, but it had also influenced Thomas's approach to his new responsibilities. He had developed what his colleagues jokingly called Whitmore's paranoia, a tendency to notice and investigate minor irregularities that other guards might have ignored. His superiors had encouraged this vigilance, understanding that Thomas's experience had given him insights that couldn't be taught in any training program. 3 months after Sir Geoffrey's arrest, Thomas had identified another potential security breach involving a junior staff member who was photographing restricted documents with his personal phone. The investigation had revealed that the man was selling royal family information to tabloid newspapers, a relatively minor crime compared to Sir Geoffrey's conspiracy, but one that could have escalated into something more serious if left unchecked. The case had reinforced Thomas's belief that eternal vigilance was the price of protecting the institutions and people he had sworn to serve. The royal family lived in a constant state of vulnerability, surrounded by people who had access to their most private moments and sensitive information. Most of these people were loyal and trustworthy, but it only took one traitor to cause catastrophic damage. Kate Middleton had returned to her full schedule of royal duties within weeks of the conspiracy's exposure, showing no visible signs of the trauma she had endured. Her public appearances were as warm and engaging as ever, and she continued to be one of the most popular members of the royal family. Only those who knew her well could detect the subtle changes in her security consciousness and her slightly increased wariness around new people. Prince William had also been briefed on the plot against his wife, though he had not been told about some of the more disturbing details. His gratitude to Thomas and the investigation team had been expressed through official channels, and he had quietly ensured that everyone involved in saving Kate's life had been appropriately recognized and rewarded. The children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, had never been told about the danger their mother had faced. They continued their normal lives, attending school and participating in family activities without knowing how close they had come to losing her. Thomas often thought about them when he reflected on the conspiracy, understanding that his actions had preserved not just Kate's life, but their happiness and security. The trial of Sir Geoffrey Blackwood had been a media sensation, though many of the most damaging details were presented in closed sessions to protect national security interests. The public learned enough to understand that a trusted royal advisor had betrayed his position for personal gain, but the full scope of his international criminal network remained largely classified. Sir Geoffrey himself had maintained his composure throughout the legal proceedings, showing little emotion even when faced with overwhelming evidence of his crimes. He had refused to cooperate with investigators after his initial capture, apparently believing that his knowledge of other sensitive royal matters gave him some protection from the full consequences of his actions. He had been wrong. The monarchy's willingness to expose and prosecute his crimes, even at the cost of some embarrassment, had actually strengthened public confidence in the institution. The royal family's transparency during the investigation had demonstrated that they were not above the law and were committed to rooting out corruption wherever it existed. Thomas had attended portions of the trial as a witness, though much of his testimony had been given in closed sessions. Seeing Sir Geoffrey in the dock, stripped of his authority and influence, had been a satisfying conclusion to the nightmare that had begun with that midnight patrol 6 months earlier. The broader implications of the conspiracy had led to significant reforms in how royal finances were managed and audited. New oversight mechanisms had been put in place to prevent any single individual from having the kind of unsupervised access that had enabled Sir Geoffrey's crimes. The charitable organizations connected to the royal family had also implemented enhanced security measures to protect against future infiltration. Thomas's role in these reforms had been consultative rather than operational, but his insights had been valued by the security professionals tasked with designing the new systems. His unique perspective as someone who had witnessed the conspiracy from the inside had helped identify vulnerabilities that might otherwise have been overlooked. As he completed his evening patrol of Windsor Castle, Thomas reflected on how much his life had changed since that October night, when he first heard King Charles's voice discussing Kate Middleton's planned murder. He had gone from being an anonymous palace guard to being one of the most trusted members of the Royal Protection Command, with access to information and people that he could never have imagined reaching. More importantly, he had learned that individual actions could have profound consequences for history. His decision to investigate that unusual light under the study door had prevented a tragedy that would have resonated far beyond the royal family itself. The preservation of Kate Middleton's life had maintained the stability of an institution that millions of people around the world looked to for continuity and tradition. The weight of that responsibility was something Thomas carried with him every day. He understood that his vigilance and dedication could again be the difference between security and disaster, between preserving the crown and watching it fall to the forces of corruption and betrayal. As the grandfather clock in the Queen's Gallery chimed midnight, marking the end of another shift, Thomas smiled with quiet satisfaction. The castle was secure, the royal family was safe, and the conspiracy that had threatened to destroy the monarchy was now just a chapter in the secret history of the British crown. Some secrets, Thomas had learned, were worth dying for. Others were worth living for. The truth he had discovered that October night had been worth fighting for, and the victory they had achieved together would protect the institution he served for generations to come. It was a lesson about the power of individual conscience and the importance of remaining vigilant against those who would abuse positions of trust for personal gain. The sun would rise tomorrow on a monarchy that was stronger and more secure because of what had been endured and overcome. And Thomas Whitmore would be there, standing guard, ready to face whatever new challenges might threaten the crown he had sworn to protect.